to this forum that we've organized together with my colleague, Ms. Mariette Schaake, member of the EU Parliament for the Netherlands. When we thought about this meeting, we tried to figure out which one of the many aspects of relations between the EU and Turkey will need to focus on, which aspects to pick up in order of priority. From the broad range of topical issues concerning the EU and Turkey, there is one that can be singled out, one which is an overarching issue, namely Turkey's European identity. How is Turkey perceived by Europe and vice versa? Hence, the topic of our seminar, Turkey's European identity through the eyes of culture and the media. A few words from myself as an introductory statement. Turkey's accession to the EU raises the issue of Turkey's European identity, the role of religion, and the borders of Europe and the European Union. This topic gives rise to many debates as to whether Turkey can at all be an inseparable part of the pan-European religious and cultural environment. As far as European identity is concerned, some politicians and analysts, the historical and cultural element is the main pillar of the European identity and defines its border. They take it that the Lisbon Treaty, which has been effective for some time, defines the identity as part of three elements: cultural, religious, and humanistic. The cultural element is the Greco-Roman civilization, the religious is the Christian roots, the Bible, Protestants, Catholics. As far as the humanistic heritage is concerned, it is the philosophical ideas in the 19th and 20th centuries. All these heritages are not mutually exclusive. They come together to define the European identity. These are well-known facts that are normally grist to the mill of Eurosceptics, who try to give quite a negative spin to Turkey's accession to the European culture. But this also has to make us think harder about this future, not give it up. At the same time, there are theories linking European identity with the present and, more importantly, the future. Hence, some researchers, many politicians and sociologists stress the need for recognizing the diversity of many models of European identity. Hence, pluralism and diversity is a common challenge to common identity, which is underpinned by the commitment of each European citizens. Hence, the discrepancy between historical and geographical boundaries in Europe. Turkey's accession presupposes acceptance of the norms of the current European culture, not Western Christianity. At any rate, there is no generally accepted definition of what is actually European identity. That's why Europe is a historically changing continuum of values filled with different meaning depending on the different needs. That is why everyone has to figure out for themselves what actually unity in diversity means. That's the motto of the European Union. How will Turkey stand up for its European identity? What about Turkish citizens? How do they perceive Europe? Does Europe need Turkey and vice versa? These are the main issues that we'll try to address today. First, we'll have two presentations by our guests. I'd like to recognize Mr. Burak Erdemir, Deputy General Secretary of the European Affairs General Secretariat. Then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Pelin Batu, an actress, artist, and activist. Thank you for your participation once again. Thank you for the interest you've shown. I would like to turn it over to Dr. Burak Erdemir.
Thank you, Mr. Kazak. Thank you all for coming. As Mr. Kazak had mentioned in his introductory remarks, Turkey's European identity is one of the most controversial issues, in fact. I've been working on Turkey's EU accession for 14 years, and I found this topic most interesting, so I decided to write a book on it. Why is it so much discussed when Turkey's accession is concerned is a funny question, because I don't think it was discussed that much when Estonia was entering into the EU or Malta was entering into the EU. I don't think they had discussed, I mean, in European circles, the European identity of Malta was discussed that much. Well, one of the main arguments against Turkish membership, as you might know, is it's being too big, too poor, and too Muslim. So it says for itself that, you know, being a Muslim country, that's part of this whole story. But let me, at the outset, say what I will say at the end, my conclusion. I don't think being a Muslim society is an obstacle for Turkey's membership, and it shouldn't be. And I will try to give my points, my arguments on it. There, of course, Islam and being a Muslim society, or having Asiatic roots, having roots from Central Asia, all have been arguments against Turkish membership in the European circles. But speaking about identity itself, not image or perceptions, speaking about identity itself, I don't believe that this shall be the issue. There are some other issues which I will be discussing. But first of all, I would like to clarify some issues before starting. When we say Turkey's European identity, from a critical discourse analysis, Turkey's European identity sounds like Turkey is the bad guy and the European identity is the good guy. We shouldn't fall into that trap. I mean, there is an interaction between Turkish identity and European identity, and we shall rather focus on how these two are interacted. And of course, during my presentation, I will focus on Turkey's shortcomings, which is a part of the story, and an ideal version of the European identity, which explains why we see European identity as the good guy. Another issue to be clarified is the concept of identity. Identity is a complicated concept, and we run the risk of coming with easy generalizations when we talk about identity, but we have to. I mean, in social sciences, we always have that risk. And on European identity itself, the debate on European identity goes hand in hand with the European Union itself, and that's why we're in this building, which is part of the European Union and this whole value system, discussing the European identity. So I think when we talk about European identity, we should also refer to the European Union and its values. So another point to be clarified is, as Mr. Kazak had mentioned, what is European identity? How do we define it? And it's not easy to define. And it's an issue for every society in this continent. As I said, you know, Bulgaria's European identity France's European identity. These all are issues of discussion, of debate. But there are mainly two perspectives on European identity. First one being the cultural interpretation, as it was also mentioned in the introductory remarks. A cultural interpretation is rather based on a Europe based on the issues coming from the past, the elements coming from the past, rightly speaking. So this could be culture, traditions, history, and the whole cultural story of the European Union. And first one, of course, would be, I mean, there's this formulation, the classical formulation says that European identity is formed of ancient Greek, ancient Greek philosophy, Roman law, Christianity, and Enlightenment. So, of course, this is kind of a elite perspective to the European identity. I mean, an identity is an issue for an ordinary citizen in 21st century, and I don't think it, you know, such a formulation really means much for an ordinary citizen in the 21st century in his or her daily life. And when we speak about religion, we have to speak about Christianity in this continent. If you base the European identity on Christianity, you exclude millions of people in this continent. Non-Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, Muslims, I mean, many groups. And in fact, there's an issue that some in the literature called European society as post-Christian societies, believing without belonging. People might have, you know, individual beliefs, you know, spiritualities, but, you know, they don't have to belong to a church. So, which makes the Christianity element quite problematic to define the European identity. Another thing would be history. I mean, when you define a national identity, you base it on, you know, common traditions, common historical incidents that you really find something in yourself. And it's really difficult to find those commonalities in this continent. I mean, European history is full of lines dividing the continent. From, you know, the clashes between different Christianity sects, groups, to the Ottoman line, different industrialization processes, the Cold War, and the Iron Curtain, of course. So it's not easy to come up with a European history. Which European history are we going to talk about? The German history, the German version of history, or the Polish version of history? And of course, national histories, national stories of societies are always stronger or dominant than European European history. And through cultural traditions, it's another issue. I mean, there are commonalities in this continent for sure. But there's the south, there's the north, there's the west and east. How can you define those commonalities? What is the, you know, common traditions of an Estonian and a Spanish? A Spanish would have more commonalities with a Latin American, I would say. So it's really difficult to come up with such an idea. And definitely, this cultural interpretation has been preferred by many, but at the end of the day, what you have in hand is a Eurocentric perspective of things. I mean, if you put, for instance, Enlightenment in this European identity, you at some point think that universal values are part of the European history. Of course it's part of, but it's not only created by the European societies or those exclusive groups. And at that point, you ignore the contributions of many societies, from China to Turkey, or you know, African societies as well. So this exclusive definition is always risky, and it is this good old Orientalism that you know, has a new kind of a version, what I would be calling Eurocentrism. But the second perspective, other than this cultural interpretation, would be a Europe based on values. Based on universal values, in fact. And it's best embodied in this building, which this parliament stands for those values. And those values have been the outcome of struggle of democracy for centuries. And in fact, the European Union is somehow symbolizing that European identity. But Still, there is an issue. Did the European continent, did the European societies reach to that level of universal values? That's an issue to be discussed. Well, I mean, the European citizenship, which was laid first down in the Maastricht Treaty, has been a basis, a legal basis for this European identity. But in real life, does such a Europe exist? Of course, there's an evolution in society, in each and every society, trying to reach those universal values. But there are shortcomings as well for this definition as well, because it's not easy to come up with standards. I mean, we're talking about values that are democracy, human rights, women's rights, individual rights, minority rights, but you don't have a standard definition of minority rights in this continent. I mean, there's this convention, Framework Convention on the Protection of National Minorities, which was not even signed by France, which is thought to be the cradle of civilization, or those values. Well, Turkey is not implementing that convention either. So it's not easy to come up with a standard, or do we have to come up with a standard? That's another issue, of course. And there are serious shortcomings as well. And if we just analyze the recent developments in European societies are sliding to extreme right, unfortunately. And for instance, the liberal parliament of Sweden is going to be having a far-right party for the first time in its history. And Roma people are being excluded, being displaced from France. And many examples in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Italy, these far-right parties are forming the government. They're being part of they're the choice of the people. And they're seen as an alternative to come up with the right policies in those countries. But what I call this European identity, and what we will be discussing most probably, is a European identity based on those values, but an ideal version of those values. And I think that Europe has this background to reach that identity somehow. And there are good examples on this continent as well. Now, let me talk about the Turkish identity. And, as my first argument, I said it's not the religion itself that is an obstacle on Turkey's identity. Why do I say it? I first would like to give. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Turkey's being on the European continent, sharing a common history with being part of the European history, or having the oldest churches in Anatolia. Those are some facts. I'm not going to go into a cultural perspective of how Turkey is part of Europe, but rather I would like to more focus on political issues, what I would call the political culture of a society. And I said at the outset that religious identity was not an obstacle. And I believe that the main clash in Turkey is not the clash between the seculars and the religious people, which is presented by Western media or in the Turkish media as well so often, but that's not what I believe. There might be a clash between, but there might be a clash in every part of the society, in every groups. There might be, but I'm saying that it is not the main clash. What I believe is that the main clash in Turkey is an outcome of the integration problem within the Turkey. Turkey had serious shortcomings in the urbanization process, starting from the Republican era, and that had implications in the Turkish identity, of course. I mean, what we are facing right now in Turkey is a clash between the lifestyles, cultures, mindsets of those people who had been somehow representing the urban classes and those who had moved in but couldn't somehow integrate. Well, those people had been ignored by many governments, starting especially from 1950s and 60s, and this was the outcome of that ignorance, that policy of not designing policies, which sounds familiar to many European countries as well, for their outsider migrants, of course. These people had moved from, especially after 1950s, millions of people changed places in Turkey. And I just want to give an example of Ankara, which is the capital of the country. In the 1920s, it was a small city, even a village. Now the population is 4 million, the fourth largest city in Europe according to Eurostat figures, after Istanbul, London, and Paris. And there were no proper policies designed for those people who had moved into those cities. And that has been a big problem in that whole identity issue of the country. I mean, because this has implications in individual rights, minority rights, women's rights, the tolerance to differences, which are what we call the universal values. And this has a very a popular issue in Turkey as well, what we call the local peer pressure, what we call in Turkey mahalle baskısı. This, I think, is somehow could be explained by this story of failure in the integration process of Turkey, within Turkey. One other problem of Turkish identity, I think, has some background, some history, which is coming from the Ottoman times. The state has been in the center of the system, with the checks and balances from the tax system to military. In every aspect of the society, the state was there in the center of the system. And in fact, for some, this was the reason why Turkey could not, or the Turkish Empire could not transform itself to the capitalist system, to a capitalist society. Because the surplus was taken by the palace, by Istanbul, and of course this had an implication on the mindset of the society. Well, and after the Republic was established, and the Republic was established by a group of elites, by bureaucrats, military and civilian bureaucrats, and this mindset of the state being at the center of the whole system had been transmitted to the new system, unfortunately. But of course, there was some, there needed to be a change in that society. I'm not blaming any group. But unfortunately, this had been carried to 1950s, 70s, and now, even in the 21st century, we're still talking about an issue of constitution in Turkey. What is a constitution? A constitution is the thing that, designs the relationship between the individual and the state. Still, we are trying to resolve our issues of the relationship of the individual with the state. And what I believe in the minority rights issue of Turkey, and still we're trying to deal with it, it is in fact an outcome of this whole story that the individual and the state had been facing. So, of course, as I said, the value system of the country has been affected so much from these developments in the society. But what I would like to say about, this was the background information. Right now, Turkey is going through a great transformation process, a socio-economic transformation. And I think that this socio-economic transformation has really implications on the identity of the country, of the people. So I think that the macro level developments have micro implications. And we can see it, in fact. Small cities which were made out of villages, in Turkey, now are becoming big cities. Point of attraction for capital, for university students, for artists, for businessmen who are exporting to many countries in the world. And Turkey is right now the 6th biggest economy in the world, which means that has a better economy than 21 countries in the European Union. And of course, as I said, this is really affecting the whole society. There's a transformation. People are no more moving to big cities. Of course, there is some movement within the country, but it has declined to very low levels. And the state is leaving its privileged position. The democratization of the country is really helping to this process. Of course, the EU accession process is helping us. From the legal perspective, of course, you cannot, solve all your problems with, bringing new legislation or changing the constitution. It's the mindset that you should be changing, but the economic change, the socio-economic change in the society is really helping this identity to reach those universal values, which we call the European identity at this point. And minority groups even having, still some problems, are enjoying rights. And it was covered by the European media as well, but these religious ceremonies in Akdamar or in Sumela were quite important developments. When people were, didn't show any reaction, which was on the, on the contrary, it was presented that, there might be some problems during those ceremonies. And this will go on. I mean, Turkey is evolving to a transformation. So, at the outset, I mentioned that being a religious society is not the major problem, but it's rather the remnants of this urbanization process of the country that we had suffered for some decades, and this state-led development of the country for centuries, I would say. But through the socio-economic transformation, Turkey is recovering, and Turkey is really becoming a point of attraction. Well, there are still issues like controversial in Turkey, like gay rights, euthanasia, or abortion. But I don't think any of the European societies or Western societies have resolved those issues as well. Well, this was the identity part of my presentation. I would also talk about the image of Turkey or Turkish identity in European countries or circles. Well, it's obvious that Turkey has a serious image problem, and we can come up with some reasons that, the immigration, historical prejudices, or low level of contact between two societies, it has been an issue. But I think the integration problem of the immigrants that have moved to European countries has really, somehow fueled this reaction in European countries. And mainstream media is also fueling these reactions, because now at this, in this year, at this decade, we are experiencing success stories as well. We cannot ignore those success stories. Coming up to the historical prejudices, in many European countries, still this is an issue. The Austrian Freedom Party, for the local elections, had a caricature last week on a paper making fun of a Turkish character, Mustafa. We don't know if this was Mustafa Pasha or Mustafa Kemal, but still people are stuck with the siege of Vienna. Can you imagine? Give me a break. It has been 350 years. Your identity is still based on the siege of Vienna. You have to recover from this thing, but identity is a controversial issue in that sense. If it's based on hostility, and unfortunately the Armenians had the same problem, it's based on Turkish hostility, you don't want to lose that enemy. Because if you lose that enemy, you will lose your identity. And I think the Austrians are suffering the same pain. And little contact between Turks and Europeans, as I said. Turkey is changing, but still, at the moment, only 1/3 of the Turkish population have passports, which means that people need to go more often to European countries and show that Turks are normal European citizens as European societies are. That's what we're trying to do. In fact, at the European Union Ministry of Turkey, we have designed a communication strategy with NGOs and trying to increase this contact between societies. We have civil society projects, civil society dialogue projects. But this prejudice, reaction, image, the perception of Europeans against Turkey is, of course, causing a concern or a reaction in Turkish people as well. Turkish people think that Europeans are not fair. And let me give some figures. 62% of Turks believe that Europeans have double standards against Turks. 50% believe that even if Turkey completes the accession process, it will not be accepted as a member. So there's a vicious circle. Europeans try to exclude Turkey out of this European whole story. Then, Turks say, okay, that's fine. I have my own story, which also covers the European story in part. But as I said, social psychology says that the contact theory of social psychology says that there should be more contact to, decrease the level of prejudice in groups. And, we can only decline this prejudice against each other by having more contact. But there are good news as well. Tens of thousands of Europeans are moving into Turkey. And according to figures, EU citizens hold 92% of the properties bought in Turkey by third country nationals. People in their retirement age come, buy properties and settle down in Turkey, showing that integration is possible. I mean, and they're not living in big cities, they're living in villages, okay, maybe in the south or the west, but they're living with Turks. So it shows that in their best time of their lives, in their retirement age, they're moving into Turkey. So it shows that Turkish people and European people can coexist easily. And the Turks are integrating, as I said, right now, 100,000 businesses generated by Turkish people with an immigrant descent. And they're generating 500,000 employment. So I think things are changing, and things are changing in good ways. And I hope it will change better. And it's so interesting to see how Western European countries are shifting to far right, while Turkey is becoming more tolerant. But I think there is an economic reason behind this. That in the first and second quarter of 2010, we grew at 10%, more than 10%, which is a dream for many European countries. And according to OECD figures, Turkey will be the fastest growing economy in the world until 2020, with India and China. And so things are not going to be the same. And when you have a good economy, you don't try to find scapegoats. And that's the case in European countries, unfortunately. And I didn't talk about EU accession process, that's my job, but one of the fears of Europeans are that once Turkey becomes a member, millions of Turks will be coming to European countries. Turkish people will not move. I mean, you guys have great countries, but the weather sucks, first of all, I mean, if you have the opportunities, employment, education, housing, opportunities in your country, why should you be leaving your homeland? And I argue even that there will be reverse migration in the long run, as in the case of Spain. So I want to wrap my presentation, coming back to the European identity. European identity as the background of those universal values. So that's why we, at the topic of this whole event is Turkey's European identity, which we think the European identity is the good guy, representing the universal values. But European identity at a time when it's recovering from the trauma of the Second World War, I think should be more cautious about this shifting to the far right. And it should come up with an identity that is based on universal values that is also covering Turkey as well in this whole definition. And I think Europe should find this way out, not because it's a win-win situation from a pragmatic perspective, because it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Благодаря много на господин Бурак.
Thank you, Mr. Burak Erdenir, for this really interesting presentation and the wide scope and all-encompassing view that he presented us regarding the European identity of Turkey. I really think it was very useful for all of us to hear this point of view on whether Turkey is part of Europe and how Europeans perceive Turkey and how Turkish people perceive themselves as Europeans. And I do think that this debate is important, and I would like to mention that amongst us we have our female activists from the movement for rights and freedoms in Bulgaria. Most of them have Turkish origin, they're Muslim, and they have a lot to share during our debate about how they are perceived in a country such as Bulgaria. The issue about the presence of Turkey in Europe. And now, dear participants, allow me to give the floor over to Ms. Pelin Batu. She's an actress. It would be really interesting for us to hear the point of view of an artist, how they perceive the European identity of Turkey, and what are the views of artists in this area. You have the floor.
I'm rather scared when you say the views of actors and actresses and artists, because, you know, we have lots of different people with different points of view, so I'm just going to present my point of view. Hello, it's nice to be here. I've been here a couple of times for a film festival, so it's going to be the first time being involved in something quite political. As to the issue of EU relations and accession problems, I really am rather confused. I tend to be pessimistic and optimistic when it comes to different issues. I swerve for one or the other, depending on the relevant facts. In this case, I really tend to come and go with all the things that have been going on in my country and all the backlashes that I've been encountering in the media in Europe and elsewhere. I have to start saying something about my identity as a Turkish citizen and activist. Looking at my portrait, it might seem as if I'm a staunch skeptic because I've been known to stage protests against certain government policies. I've been an environmental activist for the past 10 years. So, you could find me protesting against dams and nuclear power plants all over the country. I've been very vocal as to my sentiments, as to the things that I feel are wrong, that are going wrong in my country. So keep in mind that such a character is speaking to you right now. Because, as I said, I tend to swerve towards pessimism. But when I look at what has been going on for the past 10 years or so, and that's how long I've been living in Istanbul, I really realized that with some distance, by looking at the general picture, things aren't as bad as they seem to be, at least in my opinion. So the thing is, we are really going through some turbulent times. You might think I'm quite a romantic when I say that I feel like Turkey right now is like an Ahmetova poem. It's a stretch between an Ahmetova poem and a Fellini film. There's this like tragedy and comedy all embroiled into one. So when you look at what's going on, you realize that these things happened in Europe after the Second World War. You look at Spain, for example, where up to the 1970s, women were not allowed to buy property or travel without the consent of their husbands. Or you look at Ireland. I mean, I watched millions of films and read millions of books on Ireland. And, you see what women went through up to the 80s in Ireland. And now I'm looking at my country and the way things are changing there. And, the whole process is very European indeed. It's not, in my opinion, a Turkish thing or a Muslim thing or a Middle Eastern thing. In fact, the whole process of change is very European in terms of women, in terms of human rights, in terms of humanitarian things. It's just the fact that it's happening so turbulently and so quickly makes people like me see it in a convoluted way. But as I said, with some distance, you see how things are actually going for the better. I'm going to, in fact, elaborate on what Mr. Erdemir talked about in terms of identity in the second part of my speech. But I'd like to just go over some of the facts and, in fact, remind you or perhaps underline the turbulence I've been talking about. For example, in 2001, we passed a new civil code, and it did away with the previous civil code of the 1920s. Now, I can happily say that according to this new civil code, man is not seen as the head of the household, which is, I think, a great thing. In 2003, a new employment law was launched, and the Constitution was amended. We got a new penal code in 2004. And, the previous penal code had been imported from Italy. And this was Italy of the 1920s, mind you. So according to the previous penal code, women in marriages, rape in marriages was not considered a crime. It was not punished. And honor killings were treated quite leniently. So, 2001, 2003, 2004, these are really new things. It just happened a few years ago. And obviously, these changes are being implemented, but it's taking time for the mentality to kick in. The problem of theory and practice obviously doesn't go very hand in hand. As Mr. Ardiner pointed out, there has been a huge influx of the rural population into the countries, but that's stopping. And now, for example, in the urban centers, these huge, gigantic cities like Istanbul and Ankara, they are actually becoming cultural centers. They're like festivals all year round. Film is blooming. Cinema, really, a new Turkish cinema is coming into existence, thank God. And, when you look at, again, I'm going to use an analogy, since I'm a PhD student in literature, it seems like, when I look at what's going on, it's like Greco-Roman mythology, there's so much like action and blood, sweat, and tears going on, but in retaliation, with some calm, the blood, sweat, and tears is like turned into something quite creative. And that's what I want to actually talk about, because my experience as an artist shows me that, sometimes the most horrid things and the most difficult times can be translated into great works of art. And they can actually work in, bringing different peoples, religions, cultures together so as to concoct a rich, interesting art. That is what actually continues, because today we talk about this policy and that policy, this law and that law, this code and that code, accession to the EU, etc. But in the big picture, as I said, for me what's important is the creation of something that's really beautiful and meaningful. And I think that with this turbulence and with this movement and with all the changes that have been going on, this is actually finally coming about. I'd read a study a while ago about coup d'etats, and as you know, our country has been known to have a coup d'etat every 10 years, up till last year. Actually, we had an coup d'etat, but I'm not going to consider that a coup d'etat. So, the whole study focused on how it takes about 20 years for people to come to themselves after a coup d'etat. And I feel right now, in 2010s, something is actually blooming. I'm going to cite a few examples as to what I'm talking about. For example, in terms of cinema, really, when you compare the cinema today to the cinema of the past decade, it really is far more honest. It's cutting. It could be quite harsh at times, but the honesty is really, I think, touching a lot of people, and this can be seen in many countries. The reactions we get in all the festivals across the world. As to books, it's interesting to note how, for example, books that challenge state history and the status quo are becoming bestsellers. And of course, there are some negative things that are going on. Like 2 days ago, before I came here, this police chief, Hanifi Avcı, was arrested because of a book he wrote. It was a very controversial book, and it was a sensational hit. And obviously it delved into the dark world of police and politics and all sorts of dark stuff. But the point is, obviously it's an embarrassment that this man was arrested. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't think he's going to stay in that long. But, you know, obviously these things need to change. As to freedom of expression, now when you look into studies conducted into freedom of expression and media, Turkey is lagging far behind. I think we're behind Djibouti or something. Not to demean the country, but the point is, although some of these negative portraits are presented right in front of you when you do a superficial study or reading of the country, in actuality, there is this like almost underground movement that's blooming into existence, like political satire. These political satire magazines and journals are like at the peak of their existence. The last time they were so hot was in the Ottoman Empire of the 1909s, the 1908s, when I guess you could liken the state of Turkey today to the late Ottoman Empire, in that there seems to be so much freedom and yet not. So obviously I believe that in terms of freedom, things are going to go for the better. But, you know, it takes time. It took a lot of time for Europe to come to where it is. And right now, as I said, in the past 10 years or so, in terms of cinema, in terms of literature, in terms of political journalism, you know, there have been some setbacks, there have been some arrests, but there have also been some really, really great works that came out that shook the society, that basically changed the way we look at things from the core. I also want to put some emphasis on education. As I said, being a country of a strong military, which, by the way, a small parenthesis, when Europeans were asked what the advantage of taking Turkey in, a recent research declared that the biggest advantage would be our strong army, which is interesting. I guess they're looking to make use of the great army, but yeah, the fact is that the budget that had been put into the military is being set aside to the Ministry of Education. So more and more of our budget is going into education and educational programs. And this, I think, is the major, the thing that makes me most optimistic in terms of Turkey's inclusion into the EU. Whether we get in or not, the point is that good things are happening in terms of education and the arts. What else? Oh yeah, as to these problematic press polls and bans, I have to just talk about something quite humorous. Now, in the past few years, a lot of internet sites have been banned. There are about 20,000 or 30,000 sites that are banned. Don't look at me. Well, sorry, I'm just, maybe you might have backed up. I'm looking at you as a government official now, so it's my general sentiment to somehow protest. No, but really, there have been lots of internet bans, but the funny thing is, for example, our Prime Minister, in an interview he conducted last year, it was actually a press conference, when he was pushed as to the ban of YouTube, because they stopped the access into YouTube for some reason, because someone was saying something horrible about Atatürk, of all people. So yeah, we can't get into the EU. And our Prime Minister humorously remarked that there are lots of different ways of getting into it. He knows it, so we should know it too. So the thing is, there are bans, but there are also lots of ways to bypass these bans. So when you ask about the freedom of expression and speech, I'm going to again use myself as an example here. I've been doing films and dramas and documentaries for the past 15 years. But for the past year and a half, I've been working on this history show. The history show is, it goes on into the wee hours of the morning. There's a different topic each week, and each week we address controversial historical issues such as, the Armenian genocide and the destruction of Greek and Turkish historical sites in both countries. Sèvres, Lausanne, which has been an obsession in the minds of many a Turk. So, just using myself as an example, I guess it will be poignant enough. Because in the show, we do actually shake this, this skeleton of state history where, the general sentiment is challenged, is questioned. And we do this for 6-7 hours per night. And the reason why I use myself as an example isn't to brag about, my success there. But the thing is, the program, I'm overwhelmed at how people are reacting towards it. I would have people come up to me in the street and comment about my role in a film, but now people are coming to me and asking me history questions. And about 1 household out of 4 watches this program on Saturday nights. Imagine, like till Sunday morning. So obviously people are really interested in their history, and they want to look at history in a different angle, not what is being spoon-fed to them. So, as I said, in terms of education, in terms of stereotypical state history, things are actually moving towards a more free, towards a more open-minded society. Now, I actually want to talk about the issue of Turkey's European identity. Before coming here, I actually looked into some of the researches as to our identity, how we view ourselves and how Europeans view us. And I have to say that I found this recent study conducted by Boğaziçi University. The head of the department, Hakan Yılmaz, worked with the EU Commission in 5 European countries, in the UK, in Spain, in Poland, in France, and in Germany. So thousands of people were questioned as to what they see as being European, how they identify themselves as being European, and what they see in a Turk, how they see it, and where they get their information from. Now, this study, and I'm sure you can find it. If some of you are interested, I could give you the links so as to tap into the details of the study. But this study actually backs what Mr. Erdemir said as to how we view ourselves and how Europeans view themselves, but in a very detailed way. For example, normally, were you to ask me what a stereotypical European thought of his or her identity, maybe 10, 15 years ago, the classical Christian club identity statement would come to the forefront, the Renaissance, education, etc. But right now, and I'm going to give some of these numbers, the first thing a European associates with being a European is democracy and human rights. The second thing is economic development and social welfare. The third thing is tolerance for different points of view and ways of life. The fourth is protection of the environment. So, these are very post-Second World War, post 19th century humanitarian identifications. Now, the discrepancy starts when Turks are asked the question, because when Turks are asked the question, about, when was it? In 2001, when Turks were asked this question, 69% of Turks replied that they view Europe as a Christian club. Now, in 2010, when Turks were asked how they view Europeans, they have declared like a huge percentage, 60.60% or so. They see it as a center of economic development and social welfare. 12% see Europe as a center of humanitarian and human rights center of sorts. So what this research shows is that Europeans are viewing themselves in a different way, but when you ask them about Turks, the portrait is quite grim, actually. Now, I'm going to read some of this stuff. Okay, so when Europeans are asked to list their opinions about Turkish people, only 4.8% of Turks are seen to be respectful of the rights of others. 3.8% are seen to be tolerant, 3.4% as rational. Was it Sarazi who wrote this report? 2.6% clean, 2.3% sexually free. Now, when you juxtapose this picture against, the Turkey of today, you can imagine the difference is quite scary. When asked which opinion channels they gather information from, these EU members, the surveyees, have declared that media channels play an important role. So when you look at Germany, though, the picture changes. Germans apparently gather their information about Turks from the immigrants and the Turks they know. The French, on the other hand, declare that they actually listen to their political leaders. So I guess Sarkozy is the expert in Turkey when it comes to the French gathering their information about Turks. But actually, French politicians don't have to do that much because, for example, our last president had declared in a rather flamboyant manner that he was afraid that Turkey was turning into Iran. So that was amply quoted. How the media focuses on Turkey is not surprising. Obviously, stories such as honor killings and the treatment of certain women or certain groups is also always going to be juicy material for the press, and I don't blame them. What I think needs to change is that, one, Turkish politicians, diplomats need to really address this issue in a different way. My experiences, and I've been surrounded by politicians and diplomats all my life, is that they have to stop acting in an embarrassed and almost apologetic manner. Obviously, certain things are going on, certain bad things are going on, but really good things are going on too. Instead of being apologetic, you need to actually implement many of the laws you've actually passed. So, as I said, we have othered Europe in a way that we've seen it as, excuse my language here, but as a cow that needs to be milked. That had been the general sentiment. Right now, that's changing because, as I said, about 12% of the people now see it as a center of humanitarian and human rights renaissance. That's why we need to, if people look up to that, they're going to actually want to see that in their country too, and they are seeing that. But the problem here, as I said, in terms of the othering, is that Europe has been othering us for quite a long time. And I'm not just talking about the stereotypical Orientalist point of view of Turkey as being the land of, shish kebab and belly dancers. It really is, something obviously far deeper and far more ingrained into the minds of many a European. The point is, Europe, in all these polls, and it came out as 60% of Europeans see Turkey as a cultural entity. By culture, I mean you know, in terms of its religion, in terms of its Anatolianness, in terms of its different way of life. So Europe sees Turkey as cultural. We see Europe as something pragmatic in a way. So this image needs to be changed. But is it going to change? I hardly think so. Obviously, images of the other hardly change. You need not just look into people like Edward Said or Chomsky, or, you know, there have been hundreds of sociologists who talk about the problem of the other. I mean, you can start with Hegel, the other, or Sartre. It's, you know, the other cannot be changed. The other needs to be there. So we are to be your other, and you are to be our other. But the good thing here, I'm not going to be a pessimist again, is that even if the other is there, there could be a gray zone. And the gray zone, I think, comes with collaboration, as Mr. Erdemir said. There are lots of places of collaboration, and certain programs that are in progress right now are actually making a big change and bringing about different points of view in the country. Right now, there are a few European Union projects in Turkey, like 5 artists from different European Union countries are traveling in the rural reaches of Turkey and showing their art. It's important that they're doing this not in cultural centers such as Istanbul and Izmir and Ankara, but in the countryside. So the same thing, I think, should apply for artists in Turkey. The past year and a half, I've been going back and forth to Armenia because we have a group there and we're trying to actually erase the problem of boundaries when the boundaries still exist. I was a member of the jury in the Antalya Film Festival last year, and I saw a film that shook me to the ground. It's an Armenian film, and it was actually called Boundary. I was actually proposing that we give the lead actress the best part of the best actress, but, you know, it was a cow, and, you know, there are no actors in the film. And this cow was so amazing because throughout the film, the cow was trying to escape, and at the end of the film, it did escape to the other side. So I found these filmmakers, and I convinced them to bring their film to Turkey. And next year, we're hopefully going to hold a festival where a group of musicians from Turkey, these people who are really making amazing folk and world music, to work with these filmmakers. So, you know, a band, and it has a great name, the Armenian Navy Band is hopefully going to come and perform in Turkey, and the filmmakers are going to show their films. And people from our side of the border are going to present their works of art. I think that the best way to do things is to work together, to... Okay, I have to round up. I could go on. Sorry. And in terms of collaborations, obviously my realm is film, so I know that there are lots of co-productions that have been in place, but it really isn't enough. I worked with you know, filmmakers that have been working in Europe, but, you know, the whole, for example, crew and cast belong to one country, and so, you know, it looks like a production when you read the generic, but it's not. So there's, as I said, the best way to get people to think and feel and change is through the arts. And in order to do this, we need to really, and the government needs to back us up on this, found projects wherein different people could travel and work together. It's not just an issue of passports and visas. People need to actually work with other artists from different countries using different languages so as to actually meld into each other. Right now, you know, it's always said, it's a stereotypical sentence, art breaches all boundaries, and it has no boundaries, basically. But, you know, I think we can't stress this more. what needs to be done is that instead of pumping money into advertising our countries, trying to sell our countries as great places of tourism and historical tourism, etc., we need to actually back civil society, non-governmental organizations into doing projects together, be it in art, be it in politics, be it in law, whatever it is, so as to really see the side of the other. The other is always going to be another, but it could be relativized. Thank you.
Благодаря много на...
Thank you, Mrs. Batu. I think your presentation was extremely interesting. I mean, from the point of view of an artist, I myself was intrigued. The statistics was quite interesting, and her viewpoint as somebody involved in arts and using arts to build an image of Turkey. Somebody who tries to raise topical issues through arts. The country I know best, Bulgaria, has had quite a few Turkish series. There is quite a lot of interest in them. And I can tell you that the public perception in Bulgaria of Turkey and the Turks is being changed drastically, because through this series they see another Turkey, a different Turkey, a Turkey they have not known so far, a Turkey that has nothing to do with all those layers of prejudice through the years. And of course, arts and theater are the best place to raise such issues, to let others learn about somebody else. And I think that the language of arts is really a very powerful medium. Thank you, Mrs. Batu, once again. Now, since we are a bit pressed for time, I'll open up the floor to our guests for comments, questions, interventions concerning our two panelists from the first session. Please introduce yourself briefly. Brief. There was no translation into Turkish, so please ask your questions in either English or Bulgarian. You have the floor.
Really under the pressure because I have to be at another meeting, but I have to react on these two introductions. I consider myself as a friend of your country, of Turkey, and I must tell you, there is a relatively easy solution for the problem we are talking about today. There should be more Batus talking to the Europeans, trying to show them that besides of the good argumentation which Turks always have. I have been diplomat all my life, and wherever I was serving, there were a brilliant Turkish ambassador. And I always provoked them by saying they didn't like it. I told them, you know, why are you so good? You are actually heirs of the Ottoman diplomacy. It was such a splendid achievement, Ottoman diplomacy. And there are so many things which make Turkey great in the sphere of culture, or history, politics. I'm not talking about the big army, but I am talking about Turkey being a galaxy per se. Turkey does not need us. We actually, if we are smart enough, we need Turkey for 1 million reasons. And I will stop here. I would suggest to all who are presenting Turkey, either being diplomats or politicians or whatever, be self-confident. You should leave the complex behind the door before you enter in such a debate. And that's what I like with what Mrs. Batu told us. But of course, I would be even more happy if there would be a young woman and whatever profession, if she would come from Turkey without being before trained in the United States and having this eloquency of the big world. Huh? So, but I'm sure there are people like you. I'm sure there are. Just bring with you some of your friends next time when you come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Weigel. Thank you for coming. If there are other questions, please don't hesitate. Yes, please.
Hello, and thank you a lot for your presentation. My name is Martina Clary. I'm working for the Council of the European Union. Thank you a lot for your presentation. It was really, really interesting for everybody. And I think I would like to ask you, and I have two questions. If you can give us some words about the impact of the 12th September referendum, because I think it was quite important for Turkey. And also, if you can tell us what is the main Turkish motivation for the accession to the European Union. Thank you.
Could you repeat the second question, please?
What is the main motivation for Turkey to the accession to the European Union? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, please.
My name is Stella Veliki. I am a physicist, informatics, and European citizen. And I have three questions concerning Turkey. The first is how you change and what you do concerning the minority problems, especially Kurds and Armenians or Christians. And why the Turkey government didn't recognize the Armenian genocide? Because it was the first 1 million people who was died. The second is the problem of the Turkey Republic of Cyprus. It's only Turkey that recognizes part of Cyprus. It's no other European country that recognizes this Turkey Republic of Cyprus. And it will be a very big problem to come in the European community if you have this recognizing this part of Cyprus. Do you change the position considering this problem? And second and third, the human rights and women rights. So the new constitution that you have, I don't know how you want to change the mentality for the Turkish normal family, where there are not the constitution the first role, that only the religion and the other rights for the family. What you do to change this mentality? Because it is a contradiction between this mentality and the new constitution. And this constitution, the new one, don't give more rights to the extreme groups in your country than before. So I have no other question.
Да, наистина поставихте доста важни въпроси. Явно политиката няма как да не...
Indeed, you raised quite a few questions. Politics is an integral part of any discussion about Turkey, I suppose. I'd like to turn it over to our Bulgarian visitors. My name is Sergio Khelilova. I've been invited to this seminar by Mr. Kazak. I come from Sofia and I represent a women's organization, the business community, etc. I have two questions. One for Dr. Burak Erdemir. I'd like to thank him very much. He talked about the two sides of the issues, that accession to Turkey is not just Turkey's problem, it's a problem for the European Union as well. Turkey has opened up its doors to accession, and it has to, Europe has to change its criteria, I suppose. I've read statistics. There are several groups in Turkey concerning Turkey's accession to the EU. The intelligentsia, including, thinks that Turkey should not accede to the EU. There are, on the other hand, people who would like a change of their lifestyle, better career prospects. They wish that Turkey acceded as quickly as possible. Without analyzing all those statements, I would like to ask you, Mr. Erdemir, what you personally think. Of course, we don't know when Turkey will accede and whether the EU will be still there when Turkey is about to accede. But do you think that Turkey's accession will be an opportunity or a threat to Turkey and to Turkey's identity, because it will join a union which is quite a far cry from its values? We in Bulgaria have our own experience in that respect. We were faced with the same questions, whether our accession will be a threat or an opportunity. I would like to hear your own personal opinion. Secondly, a question for Mrs. Pelin-Batu. It's about something that you said. I would like to extend a public invitation to you. I hope that you will say yes. Right now we are working on a media project. We will create a dynamic TV program, which I hope will become national. It's meant for youth. Would you take part in this program? That's my question. Are there any other comments, questions for our panelists? Please, you have the floor.
My name is Porto Carrero. I'm working for Europe Today, a newspaper. It's a bit, maybe a nasty question, but given the statements of your president, Mr. Gül, at the United Nations about Turkey's aspirations as a leader in the Muslim world and its ties to Iran, concerning the nuclear, ambitions of that country. Doesn't that contribute in a way to this shaping of the other and not from the part of Europe? I'd like a statement of Ms. Batu, if possible, and of course also of Mr. Erdemir. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question before I turn it over to our panelists. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Laura, and I'm just taking an internship here. So, first of all, you talk about human rights violations, which of course happen everywhere, even in Europe, but no system is perfect. But can we compare the human rights violations that happen in Europe with the human rights violations that happen in Turkey? For example, women's rights or death penalty, or even the Cyprus problem, which is where Turkey possesses Cyprus for over 30 years by force, and which is another European country, and I believe that is a bad start to get into Europe. You also talk about prejudice, which I think, sure, it exists in both sides, Turkey and European side. But is it prejudice what Armenians have? I mean, thousands of people were killed, and Turkey has still not recognized that event, if I may call it. And sure, I mean, Germany started the Second World War, but admitting the problem and admitting the fault of one country is, I think, the first step to leave or to keep away grudge or bad feelings from both sides. I also wanted to say that is a good thing to hear that penal codes and civil codes have been introduced into Turkey, but I don't think that introducing a good legal system is the only thing that makes an European identity, but it's the state of mind of the people, and if they apply that law and respect that law, that makes a European identity, not just a legal system. And if you still hear in Germany about killings that Turkish family do to their daughters for the honor of the family, then I don't see how they respect their own law in their own country if they can't even respect the law in the country they live in. And finally, I want to say that it's nice to hear about the process that Turkey is going through, but until that process is complete, I don't see how we can accept Turkey in the European Union right now. If it has reached a 7 level, then I don't see no reason why both sides should not change their minds or leave away prejudice. Thank you.
Благодаря много. А сега позволете ми да дам думата на...
Thank you. I would turn it over to our panelists for answers. We'll have a second round of discussions after the second session, so we'll have an opportunity to take the floor there.
Mr. Erdenir, thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Well, in my presentation, I avoided political issues and I tried to present it from a non-bureaucratic perspective, not to be boring. But I think the audience wants some kind of boring stuff. Well, I mean, those issues that have been brought by some questions, starting from the constitutional amendment, the referendum issue, minority issue, Cyprus issue, then the Armenia issue. Well, you should look at things through perspective of how things have changed in Turkey and how Turkey is managing its problems. I mean, when you go back to 1990s or to starting of the century, when we had meetings in European countries or in the United States, we always had this cautious attitude that our diplomats or our politicians would face those harsh questions, but we don't anymore. I mean, you might have a harsh perspective against Turkey, as our intern had a very harsh perspective. We take it, that's fine, that's your point of view, but we really are not any more cautious. I mean, we're not concerned of those questions because Turkey has been facing her problems. Turkey is not anymore sweeping the problems under the carpet anymore. We're facing it. We face the Cyprus issue. I mean, I'm not going to go into the Cyprus issue in the details. I mean, this is a meeting room where the Joint Parliamentary Committee happens, and our parliamentarians, have been trying to resolve this issue with their Greek Cypriot counterparts for decades. They have not. But things are moving. I mean, we should put things into perspective. In minority issues, I myself, as a bureaucrat, I'm in charge of the political criteria chapters, chapter 23 and chapter 24. You're pushing me into boring stuff, but through those work, we are meeting with the minority groups once in 2 months, 3 months, taking care of their problems, and we're not even perceiving them as minorities anymore. We're perceiving them as the citizens, are equal citizens, as equal individuals of our country. That's the perspective we take. And it's not only the legal changes, which has been great. Mrs. Batu had mentioned the changes since 2002. I don't want to go into bureaucratic issues, but really identity is really shaped by the socio-economic, the socio-political, the legal system of the country. And I mean, this didn't happen in overnight. This is happening through a process. And I told you at the beginning that I've been in this thing for 14 years, and I'm experiencing since the start of the customs union, which Mr. Kazak had a very excellent report on this issue. You can see how things are changing. So, I mean, and I tried to be critical to the Turkish identity as well. I mean, I didn't, I didn't try to give a very a great picture of Turkish identity. I pointed out the problems as well through an historical perspective, and maybe a bit more. I mean, I was a bit critical. How more can I be critical on Turkish identity? You know, democratization is happening in Turkey, that's for sure, and it has implications in every area. As Mrs. Batu had mentioned about its implications on arts, in cultural events, and you can see this change in Turkey. I don't want to go into each and every detail of those questions, like the constitutional amendment package. You know, we prepared an action plan. It is, you know, I can brief you on it, but it has details, but it covers issues like the Ombudsman institution being established in Turkey, which is in itself something. We're establishing a human rights institution, a national human rights institution based on UN standards. So, of course, the implications, the practice of this whole legal change will have its effects, and that's why I didn't draw a very optimistic perspective or a picture of the past, but I'm drawing a better picture for the future, because I can see how the country is changing. Still, we have problems in the country, because Turkey is in such a geography that we had to face since the beginning of the 20th century. It has not been easy to, you know, come up to this point. I mean, going back to the Armenian issue, out of the Ottoman Empire, tens of countries were, tens of nation states were established. And establishing a nation state has never been easy. It has always been bloody. In all over this continent, not only in Turkey. I mean, you always suffer from being an empire. And I think we're trying to, you know, get rid of those remnants, which had been a pain for Turkey, for Turkish identity as well. Well, coming to the EU accession process, well, what will Turkey take out of this process? Of course, Turkey is really benefiting from this process. It's not an easy process, you know. It's there's still a big reaction against European Union or Europeans in Turkey, but you know, you can see that the European Union is acting as an anchor for Turkish reforms, and how things are changing. It's really contributing, and that's why we always call it a win-win situation. I mean, I can list the contributions Turkey will make to the European societies, from aging, from the pension system, to labor, to you know, the alliance of civilizations, integration of immigrants, so many issues I can list. But it of course has you know, the same benefit for Turkey from a different perspective. But I'm afraid that this change that is going in, you know, which is helping Turkey to evolve to a positive way, might affect Turkey's aspirations on EU accession. Because Turkey is growing, Turkey is developing, and Turkey is becoming more democratic. And at some point people ask, why are we, you know,
trying to get in?
Yeah, why are we trying to get in? You know, this is too much of double standards of what the Europeans are doing. You're talking about Cyprus issue. And in 2004, I don't want to go into the Annan plan story. I mean, the guys, the Turkish Cypriots said yes, and the Greek Cypriots said no, and then you enter into the EU. I mean, that was the day when the game was over. These people are trying to solve the issue, and you have to be fair to Turkey on some issues. I mean, Turkey should face the problems, that's another issue, but you have to be fair as well. So, and at some point, those double standards will be really, you know, have the reaction in Turkish society. And when you grow with 10% growing rates, economic rates, growth rates, at some point, you know, you say that pride changes into arrogance, which is dangerous from my point of view. I mean, I would want a Turkey which is part of the European Union system. I want Turkey to be a member of the European Union, not because I'm doing this job as my profession, but this is the right thing to do. And this is the right thing to do from not only from an ethical perspective, from a pragmatic perspective as well. I mean, I you know, wrapped up my speech with an ethical perspective, but from a pragmatic perspective, it's the right thing to do for both sides. And I'm afraid if these double standards go on against Turkey, I don't know what the future will bring us. And as in my speech, I tried to, you know, focus on the contact theory in social psychology. I asked our intern that she asked a good question, but we can employ interns in our ministry, foreign interns as well. I ask you to come and do an intern in my ministry so you can learn more about how Turkey is changing, how the Turkish policy is changing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Erdinir, and now I give the floor to Mrs. Batu. Thank you.
Miss, thank you. I'm just going to add some stuff to Mr. Erdinir's comments. As to the women issue, I think there are a couple of questions as to the problem of theory and practice. I think we keep focusing on the lady intern's commentary because that was the last and the harshest. So, but in terms of women's rights, as I said, there's lots of ground to be covered. But an important NGO conducted a survey, TESEV, in Turkey, as to the point of view on arranged marriage. Now, this is striking. In 1997, which is quite recent, 69% supported arranged marriages. 8 years later, this percent fell to 54%. Today, 90% of unmarried youngsters, be it women or men, are against arranged marriage, which means that these people, and they've declared that the best way to find a partner is through dating. So, you know, like in terms of women and men's relations, in terms of women's role in society, not only in terms of, you know, like new codes and women's rights laws, etc., but in practice too, the mentality is changing. As I said before, you know, there's lots of stuff to do, but we have covered a lot of ground in the past 10, 15 years. As to Turkey's possible ascension into the EU. Now, like, as we've pointed out from the very beginning, this past year has been quite tumultuous and really hectic. We've been dealing with the Kurdish issue. We've had all these new laws passed. The referendum was so chaotic. I mean, it was supposed to be a referendum, but in my opinion, it was more so like a preview to the elections next year. And as you all very well know, before elections, politics and politicians tend to diverge on their subjects and get into things that have nothing to do with the relevant issue at hand. So, you know, yeah, it was a difficult year, and this whole EU issue, in my opinion, as a citizen watching television and following the media, the EU issue was frozen in some never land where, you know, like there's a really boring EU show in the state channel which no one watches. And in the press, there are only a couple of columnists who address the issue of EU relations and accession. Otherwise, it's hardly even mentioned. And this doesn't just go for Turkey. When you look into the press of, you know, the UK and some other European countries, you know, it's not always EU problems that are that find their places in print. Oh yeah, as to the point of view of getting to the EU. Now, recently, a report was published by German Marshall saying that, you know, Turkey isn't really looking into getting into the EU. But some of the professors that I've been collaborating with have said that, you know, either these polls are rigged or somehow flawed, or the questionnaires are problematic, because, you know, it doesn't make sense. If, how many? 58% of people voted yes in the referendum, right? 58% of these people are more or less likely to be pro-EU, because it doesn't make sense. These people are for change. These people want to get into the EU. But then, you know, in the German Marshall Fund, what was it? German Marshall Fund's polls, like a huge percentage says that, you know, they've become Euro-skeptics and they don't really believe in getting into the EU. So there obviously is a problem there, and I really don't buy into their polls. My university's polls state that, yes, it has fallen since 2001 and 2004, but it's not as huge a percentage. As to the nuclear question, now this is my favorite thing. I go from college to college preaching how I'm against nuclear energy. The thing is, obviously, developing countries such as, you know, China, where a coal mine is opened each week, or India, where an airplane company is founded almost each week, these developing countries always have the same classical answer. The West developed at their own time. Now they're telling us not to develop and not to become industrialized, right? I mean, this is a classical argument that we're always going to hear. The point is, yes, the government is pushing towards a pro-nuclear energy politics. We are, in fact, the government is trying to launch 2 nuclear power plants in the central north and south of Turkey. But with this, I guess, surge of politics is a backlash. People such as myself, and we are a growing group, I can tell you that. Only this Saturday, as soon as I go to Turkey, for example, we're launching a huge protest against the building of a 3rd bridge in Istanbul, which, according to our calculations, is going to annihilate 2 million trees in Istanbul, which means about one-third of the greenery in Istanbul. So yes, we are actually growing and we are protesting against the government's environmental programs. Obviously, I think one of the main problems in Turkey isn't the government, because governments are like this, you know, they're obviously going to be pragmatic. They're, in fact, contradicting us when it comes to environmental issues, saying that, you know, we need energy, we need to develop a new environmental policy. But, you know, every action has a reaction. As I said, we are growing in numbers, and I think we are, in a way, maybe I'm being too optimistic here, but we are changing certain things. We're putting a halt to the building of certain dams, for example. And, you know, in terms of this whole thing with Iran, I feel like, you know, if you were to ask any old man in the street, when you tell them, oh, the EU doesn't want you, they're going to turn their backs and, you know, try to latch on to a different commission. So, you know, now in Turkey, borders are being lifted with, for example, Syria and all these other countries. Visas are completely out of the picture. So, you know, when you look at the picture of Turkey in the 21st century, they are trying to better their relations with, you know, their neighbors, which is a great thing. I completely support that. But at the same time, in terms of environmental problems and whatnot, they really need to, in my opinion, get their acts together and, you know, comply with some of the standards that have been set beforehand. We are developing, but we also need to, you know, save what we have. And we do have an amazing grounds for eco-tourism, farming, you know, really good organic farming. Unfortunately, you know, different companies are trying to launch laws wherein genetically modified horrible things are seeping into the market, but, you know, hopefully it's going to balance each other out. Thank you. Oh, and I'd love to. My father's side of the family is from Bulgaria, and it would be great to go back to my roots, so I'd love to collaborate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Batu. And this is the end of the first part of our discussion. Thank you very much for our honorable speakers. And now for the second panel of the debate, I leave the floor to my colleague, Mrs. Shaki.
Thank you, Metin, and thank you everybody for staying engaged and staying here. We're only halfway of a very exciting morning, and it's incredible what a variety of questions and issues the issue of identity raises in the relations between Turkey and the EU. As the ALDE group, the family of liberal parties from various European countries, we've been very focused on keeping relations between Turkey and the EU strong and focusing on the accession process. I believe that this exceeds political party politics, but is a bigger goal that needs a longer-term vision and that needs very diverse support and collaboration, which is very challenging for us here in our home countries as well. But perhaps because we are a small party and we're used to being in the opposition, we have a lot of energy to keep up this struggle, which I think we see in both Turkey and the EU that there are differing opinions about this relationship. Although when we talked about the referendum, I don't think this was a referendum about EU accession, but maybe I've missed something. I think it was about something internal in Turkey. I think this bottom-up activism that Pelin Batu displays is very powerful and inspiring, because there are many people in Turkey who are not organized in political parties, but who still should be engaged also with the EU accession perspective and the relations with the EU. I was also struck by the example you gave of the research done at Bosporus University, where Europeans were asked to self-identify. And I think it was fascinating to hear that democratic values, the appreciation for economic growth and stability and tolerance for minorities came up as the top three, because these are precisely the Copenhagen criteria which are asked of candidate member states to meet before accession. These are not changing criteria. They've been grounded and stable for a long time. And I think the argument of double standards, which is one we hear quite often, can actually be met by saying everybody is held by the same yardstick, namely the Copenhagen criteria, and this is the only way to take candidate member states seriously. And we, as an opposition party in the EU, also in the Netherlands, we're constantly trying to improve the appreciation and the adherence to democratic values, human rights, fundamental freedoms, respect for minorities, freedom of expression, etc. And it is indeed a process that needs constant work in our own countries, in the Union, and in relation to candidate member states. So I just wanted to highlight that before we go on to the next panel, where we will focus on the role of media, which is incredibly important. The media are a pillar of democracies, a pillar in open societies, and freedom of expression and criticism to the establishment are crucial values that we see here in the EU. And again, one of those values that needs constant work, because we have a lot of challenges to that open space for criticism and free expression, pluralist ownership in Europe ourselves. So I will ask these two distinguished journalists, who I'll introduce in a second, for their experiences in the way the media shape images, but also in the space within which they work in Turkey and in Europe, because we are very fortunate to have two distinguished journalists. I'll begin by introducing Aslı Aydın Taşbaş. She's a Turkish journalist, a columnist at the moment for the Turkish daily Milliyet, where she focuses on domestic politics as well as foreign affairs. In addition to covering national debates for Milliyet, she also regularly publishes in international media, such as the International Herald Tribune, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times, on Turkey-related issues. Her work has also appeared in Forbes and the New Republic, on Salon.com, and in other weekly publications. Prior to joining Milliyet, she wrote a column for Akşam, and she served as the Ankara bureau chief for Sabah, which is one of Turkey's leading newspapers. Before working in Turkey, she also spent a lot of time in the United States, where she interviewed a number of high-level people and has traveled with Abdullah Gül, Prime Minister Erdogan, in their visits between 2004 and 2008. She's traveled to Iraq, and she's interviewed numerous global leaders such as Colin Powell, Jalal Talabani, and Shimon Peres. She also studied in the United States and has wide experience in the field of the media. Then we have a very special representative of the media who is both Turkish and Bulgarian. So perhaps a great example of the integration and the accession that we are hoping to achieve, where both these identities will be European one day. Ms. Nahide Deniz Cümer has graduated from Sofia University and from Istanbul University in Turkish language and literature. She's now a journalist and works as a correspondent for the Bulgarian news agency in Turkey and does freelance correspondence work for a Bulgarian publication and for the BBC in Russian from Turkey. So thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing your statements, and we'll start with Aslı Aydın-Taşbaş.
Thank you, Marici. I feel like there's a reason we journalists are sort of universally, globally hated, and it's because our job is sort of to talk about the one negative story out of 15 positive stories. So after two upbeat presentations about Turkish democracy, I kind of feel I have this awkward position of having to talk about media freedom issues, which obviously makes me the bad person on the panel from the get-go. But again, that's what we do as journalists. If the story is not that the dog bites the man, which happens every day. The story is about the man biting the dog. So I'm here to talk about the aspects of Turkish democracy that are not covered and the media issues that are not covered. I do have to say, I do think that both Pelin and Burak were right in pointing out that Turkey has emerged as a vibrant democracy, that there is activism, that there is, identity issues are totally exaggerated in the European context, and that freedoms are getting better. But on the other hand, we do live in a geography where, no, there's no doubt that things are improving and our democracy is improving. But we also happen to live in a geography with examples of countries in the Far East, in countries on the fringes of Europe, like Russia, countries like United Arab, where illiberalism makes its way towards a democratic framework, creating a sub-democracy which has every function and institution of a democracy. So therefore, the thing we need to watch out for in terms of creating democratic benchmark are the stories that are the deficiencies in any democracy. Has Turkey improved? Sure. Has Turkish media freedoms have improved? Definitely, undoubtedly. But it's not my job to talk about how much they have improved. In fact, it's my job as a journalist to talk about what's missing. So after that introduction, that's why I say there's a reason we journalists are hated globally. We just are paid, basically, to talk about things that people don't want to hear. I think that in many ways, our media climate has significantly improved with changes in laws that restrict freedom of expression. Is it where I would like it to be? No, very far from it. Why? And how do I know that? Well, I do know that because there's 40-something journalists still in jail that have not done anything except, writing. And, well, I should say that they're in jail, not all of them are in jail because of their writings. Some of them are part of cases that are, like the Ergenekon cases that are more controversial. But also, what's more troubling to me is libel laws, libel laws, whereby people of power or celebrities or anybody could sue journalists for defaming them. And obviously you have libel laws in every country, but in Turkey courts tend to enforce them in such harsh measures that you often have journalists, 700 journalists are facing a court case, are facing lawsuits some of them with the threat of imprisonment right now. I think that somehow, you know, our laws have incorporated values that should exist in a society but should not be penalized, such as respect. You know, you cannot have a cartoon that disrespects the position of a prime minister or a president, and being somebody who believes in totally liberal values, I don't think respect is something you can penalize or codify in a legal system. That does infringe it, because cartoons are about cartoons. Cartoons are about disrespecting everybody. So it's issues like that that's one thing, that the sort of the way respect and those paternalistic values make their way into laws that govern freedom of expression are problematic to me. The second aspect is obviously, and much is talked about this, the polarization. You know, everybody talks about the polarization in Turkish society, especially after referendum results, which reveal a totally no on the western coastlines and a yes in the hinterland, and a Kurdish southeast boycotting the elections. We had a map of 3 colors. The fact that this is happening does not really bother me as much, because this is democracy. America is like this. If you look at the election results, with 2 coastlines totally voting Democratic and the interland voting Conservative. We have a similar situation in Turkey, where coastlines are liberal and the hinterland is Conservative, and this is democracy. It's not, but we also have the same thing going on in media. And we have it going on in media in such an extent that we have now loyal newspapers and outlets that would pretty much support anything that the government does. We have opposition media that would be willing to criticize much of what the government do. And then we have sort of this gray area, people trying to, and it's very troubling when the written word and the sort of free thoughts are actually engineered and cut in such a way that they become just political ploys in a chess game. I used to work at a newspaper, for example, which I hate giving this example, but I give this example every time I speak. I used to work at a newspaper called Sabah, which was Turkey's 2nd largest newspaper. This is an experience I was the Ankara bureau chief after being a Washington correspondent. It's obviously an experience I can never forget, because one day, you know, lots of officers and cops and plainclothes officers and uniform cops came into our building, and I happened to be at work in Ankara that day. But essentially, the newspaper was taken over by the government. Entire Turkey's 2nd largest newspaper taken over by the government, and thereafter, this is in 2007, and sort of a government fund ran the newspaper for a while, you know, firing people, hiring people, making editorials, and then it's sold to a businessman very close to the government. There's nobody can explain to me that this is an okay thing. You know, this is not to say it's a bad newspaper, except right now the paper I used to work, you know, never has a story that would upset the government. And to me, that's not, you know, I may support the government in one policy, and I may criticize them on another policy, but I cannot work at a place where the de facto position is that we're going to support the government. It's not journalism. And we have way too much of that happening, and way too many journalists, newspapers that are in those positions. You know, again, I was excited about the clauses in the recent referendum. Ombudsman, I think one of the speakers talked about, fantastic and all that. But, you know, if I was a farmer, I would really care. I would give you a speech about wheat prices and, you know, how the government's wheat policies are affecting my life. Since I'm a journalist, I can only talk about media. So as excited I was about some of the changes in the referendum, when Turkey's one of the most popular journalists, secular, hardline secularists nonetheless, is fired the day after the referendum, to one of Turkey's most popular journalists, because, you know, he's offensive to the government, and owner of the newspaper decides to fire him, that makes me feel very bad and almost nauseous and almost, very pessimistic. I go back and forth between this pessimism and optimism because obviously advances in democracy and the rise of activism and sort of are amazing. But we still have not done what we need to do in terms of legal reform. Legal reform is the only way you can guarantee, well, there's two things from my end that we need to see happening in media climate for me to see a media climate that I'd like to work in. One, obviously, is a bit of self-criticism. It's very difficult to sustain free media with the current ownership structures. Let's also look at the mirror, and ownership structures in Turkish media are also problematic because you have a lot of businessmen owning newspapers, you have a lot of businessmen who have interest in other fields owning newspapers. Obviously, it makes them, it makes them more susceptible to either political pressure or more willing to use it. And you have, or other groups that are not necessarily, doing maybe good journalism, but not only doing journalism, but owning media. So independent ownership of media is very, very important, and we're still not there. There's very few examples of that. That's self-criticism. The second issue that I would like to see is obviously significant changes in laws that govern free speech. I don't think we have a free speech law. I'm not happy with what we have. Libel laws are horrible. They're worse than what they have definitely worse than what they have in America, worse than what they have in Albania, and worse than what they have in Britain. That ought to change. I don't want journalists facing lawsuits, libels, having to pay compensation, having to pay fees, or face imprisonment for defaming, disrespecting, etc. That said, of course, Turkish journalism does need to get its act together because do more fact-checking, be more considerate and all that. But all those are qualities that you ultimately have to leave to society and to readers and to market forces. You cannot regulate good journalism. You cannot enforce it by laws. You have to let people. There's a newspaper. There in some countries there's newspapers like News of the World that talk about. They're sold in supermarkets that talk about aliens coming and kidnapping. You can't ban that. Smart people, which is 99.9% of the society, are not going to believe that aliens have kidnapped somebody and returned them as so and so. And those newspapers are sold somehow. Is it journalism? Not exactly, but you cannot ban anything in terms of, unless, if it's just about thoughts, opinions, ideas, or even fantasy. I had some objection to parts of it, but I didn't, just to the way it was dealt with. It was passed, not with a sort of unanimous consensus, but sort of like in a very fast way. But the package itself was fine. But what Turkey needs is not a package. It's not another package of 20. Turkey needs a new constitution. What we have is a very poor, very long document that was drafted by the military in 1980. It's been amended numerous times. 85 clauses have been amended until this recent package, and with the recent package over 100. But still, you need, as Burak has said, a constitution is something that defines a state's relationship with the individual. The individual is powerless vis-a-vis the state as long as you have this constitution. For the longest time, we criticized the military's heavy hand in Turkish media, and now we're criticizing the government's heavy hand in Turkish media. As long as you have this constitution and this media structure, this will continue. The next time, if you have Martians running Turkey and winning elections, we're going to be complaining about the Martians, people from Mars, having too much power in media. Internet, I'm glad Pelin touched upon that because nobody can explain to me again why YouTube is banned. There's part of the ban is about PKK stuff, part of it is about Atatürk, part of it is other things. But again, wait a minute. Why is YouTube banned in Turkey since 2008? It's funny that there's 5,000 websites, including porn, and even that is something I think that I would like to, I would open up to debate. Why is porn banned but that's obviously not my focus. I really do, you know, I really, you know, mind about websites and whatnot being banned and internet being, and now you have cases of, obviously there's no, you know, once you open the door, there's no limit to your imagination. Now you have cases of people being, people who have put statements on their Facebook, you know, being taken to court for what they put on their Facebook page. You know, it happened to an opposition politician recently that his Facebook entries are like somebody's doing. No, that's just not, we've created a culture of constant debate and fighting and control that ought to change to a culture of, you know, you have to, you know, democracy, you have to stand for the right of those who don't think like you and who don't talk like you. And if you can't stand it, you have to shrug your shoulders. If you can't shrug your shoulders, you answer them, but you don't take them to court. It's, I think that the larger issue is states or governments should not control access to information from a variety of sources. That is something that ought to be not challenged. You don't go about that unless it's a major national security concern. And those are, you know, that whole thing is becoming, for me, more problematic, not less problematic. Although we have a very vibrant and diverse media climate. And I'll give you an example that I wrote about, and I was very much criticized for writing about it. I like to talk about that example because I don't know the guy, and I don't know, but it's just such and full of ironies. I saw this story in my own newspaper about a prosecutor who was talking on the phone a few years ago and swearing at the head of, you know, to a friend and using sort of foul language about the head of, about the prime minister, head of the parliament, and somebody else. So he was criticizing and maybe swearing and maybe this and that. The guy was talking to a friend. His phones, it turns out, were wiretapped, and they were wiretapped illegally. And the tape, somehow the conversation, we have a huge problem with illegal wiretaps in Turkey. That's another issue that maybe, you know, it's not the framework of this conversation. But that guy was illegally wiretapped, put on YouTube. His conversation is put on YouTube. And now he's being sued by prosecutors with the consent of the Ministry of Justice for 8 years imprisonment for a private conversation he had on the phone, swearing at somebody, which is put on YouTube, which is banned in Turkey in the first place. You know, the irony is that you can't even, how did the Ministry of Justice get to YouTube? You know, I'd like to know. And then, you know, these are things that drive me nuts in Turkey. And they used to happen before. They didn't happen for a while. They're happening again now. And again, it's my unfortunate position to have to talk about stuff like that. If we are, the irony is, I think, that there's good stories in media as well. As you may know, that the Kurdish opening, what we call the Kurdish initiative or the Kurdish opening, is what the government has been engaged with vis-a-vis sort of really liberalizing Kurdish culture and identity and really working towards a political solution to this whole crisis. It's been in the works since 2008, openly since last year. It's a very painful and difficult process. It's like a chess game, but I'm very supportive of it. In terms of the media, I very much like the fact that we can talk about the Kurdish issue in ways we couldn't talk about it before. I really think that, you know, I can write articles that I couldn't before, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you know. And Kurdish media itself, like pro-Kurdish, even sort of pro-PKK media, can now exist without without the sort of the, previously basically it was a constant case of shutting down newspapers and, imprisonment and lots of human rights violations there. So that is like, while the fringe, on the fringe, while the fringe media is more free, I think mainstream media, the established newspapers, feel more of a sense of government control. So I don't know how to reconcile that irony, but I think it is the media freedoms issue, is going to be the story, the big story about Turkey and human rights in Turkey over the next few years. I have no doubt, because it's getting a lot of attention. It's constantly now in the State Department human rights report. It's often been criticized by the European Union. Both the State Department and the European Union have criticized Turkey have long criticized Turkey for legal limits on freedom of expression. But now they're talking about the sort of like, for example, quotation from 2009 State Department reports on human rights practices say individuals in many cases could not criticize the state or government publicly without risk of criminal suits or government investigations. Now, I would like to live in a country where you can criticize the state, the military, the government without fear of investigations. I think that Pelin brought up the issue of Hanefi Avcı, and obviously that too is an issue of freedom of expression. It's the recent book by this police chief. It's interesting that you brought it up in a cultural context. I agree with you. It's apart from the political story, it's a cultural story about freedom of expression. You can't write a book and find yourself in jail the next week. Especially this guy is a whistleblower, and he wrote a controversial book. Too long to go into it, but the fact is that he's in jail now, in the same cell with two of my colleagues whose opinions I really despise. The former head of Cumhuriyet Ankara Bureau Chief Mustafa Balbay and Tuncay Özkan, who are in jail for Ergenekon investigation. I don't think I remember a single day where I thought like they did. But it pains me every day now that they are in jail as part of this investigation, because I really, having read the indictment, I really think these people have no risk of running away. I really think that, two prominent journalists should not be in jail for allegedly supporting a coup. So it's issues like this that I keep myself busy with. Again, to go back to Burak and Pelin's presentation, yes, overall, Turkey is a better place than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And yes, it's a vibrant democracy, but everybody is a better place. We have to be a much, much better place in our standards, and we have to be very aware of the trend in our geography like Russia, towards a strong government that it brings prosperity and economic stability and political stability. That's not necessarily a good thing. It may be good for per capita income, but it's not necessarily a good thing for freedom of speech. So because we have that tendency in other countries in our geography, not to the west but to the east, this is something we need to also watch out for. I'll end it here.
Thank you very much. Ms. Deniz, you have the floor.
Аз днес май се закъснявам.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Maria Shaki and Mr. Kazak and everyone organizing this seminar. I'm very happy to have Burak Erdenir here with us. I've quoted him several times without him knowing me. I'm talking about press conferences in Turkey. My colleague Asil Ayditanbash gave us an insight, a deep insight into Turkish journalism. She's got a wide experience in that respect. I personally have used her analysis and evaluations quite often, but my task here is a bit different. I'll try to talk about the Turkish media in the process of EU accession. A few words about myself, so that you can place my presentation in a better background. I was born in Bulgaria, and I was hit by the communist regime in Bulgaria under Todor Zhivkov. My name was changed, like the names of a million Turkish citizens in Bulgaria. I wasn't repressed, but the name change was really hurtful. I moved to Turkey. I've been working for media for almost 15 years. I mean, media presenting in Bulgaria. I've got Turkish and Bulgarian nationality. I'm considered a foreign journalist in Turkey, and since I'm a freelancer, I don't have to stand up for the point of view of one media in particular. I've got a greater choice and variety. Now, let me get to the point. Turkey's European accession is covered in the media there, definitely. There have been no taboo topics in that respect. No matter where exactly on the political spectrum the media is situated, medias present arguments in favor of their position. They don't spare anything. The Turkish media are very dynamic, energetic, hardworking. They deliver ever some surprises. In just one day, there are so many events in Turkey, something that will take a month for a European country to collect so many events. And I think that the media cope quite well with that dynamic environment. At the same time, they differ quite a lot from other media. They've got their own profile. They've got their internal dynamism. Things that take 30 years to change in other countries take about 4 to 6 years here to change. After the EU gave the go-ahead to the negotiations for Turkey's accession, the media have covered a long way towards constructive attitude. We've got good analysts, specialists in EU affairs. I won't mention names here because there is always the risk that I could forget someone. Foreign media have recently quoted quite a lot Turkish media, something which was quite not the case a few years ago. Turkey has become an important player. It became an eclectic country, so to speak, which means that there is more work for the media. And I personally think that the Turkish media have become more confident, more critical, more demanding. They can point a finger exactly where it hurts, something that's very important. Public confidence has eroded as far as some traditional institutions in Turkey are concerned, but confidence in the media has been bolstered, as shown by an American foundation research. The media have contributed to focusing the public opinion on important matters as far as the European Union is concerned and on topics related to the current Turkish identity. I mean, topics like gender equality, an important issue for Turkey, the rights of minorities, NGO activities. National media hold campaigns to eliminate illiteracy among girls. Public attention was focused on the so-called honor killings, a very painful problem for Turkey, a clash between prejudices and the new. And, well, the thing is that the media are in search. The media can even hold accountable some institutions. The campaign I was talking about was quite well received by the public. Now, about the rights and freedoms of minorities. The Turkish media are quite tolerant in the way they cover such problems, unlike other media, which focus on the conflict, the clash between Christianity and Islam. The Turkish media are more tolerant. There is this aspiration to learn more about others. Thanks to the media, topics that were taboo in the past, like the Orthodox Seminar, church school that was closed down, religious rituals, and so on, are now in the center of public attention. There is quite wide coverage. For instance, in Edirne, there are 2 Bulgarian churches, in Istanbul also. Local media cover quite well religious ceremonies. The participation of Bulgarian, Armenian citizens, Greek citizens in such rituals, the relations between these citizens and the local community. Hamdin was killed several years ago, as you know. We couldn't save him, unfortunately. At the same time, 100,000 Turks went out in the street in protest, saying, "We are Armenian." The protests are still going on in relation to that killing. I wonder whether there is a country where 1,000 people will go out in favor of the Romas and say, "We are Roma." One of the most widely circulated newspapers, Hürriyet, covered an article about Saint Stephen, a Bulgarian church in Istanbul, and it said it was the most beautiful church. Also, Armenian church, and the opening of this church for rituals was something quite widely covered by the media as well. This was 2 weeks ago. The ritual was quite good despite the pressure put by other media. Why am I telling all this? What's my point? Because these things were a taboo, but now they can be freely discussed and covered. This means that there is greater tolerance on the one hand, and on the other, I think that that's the emanation of public effort to turn towards the problems of minorities. Because on the one hand, we have politicians, but at the other extreme, there is the media. Cultural diversity is widely covered. We had some tragic incident. A group of citizens, Islamists, attacked an art gallery in Istanbul, a Tophane quarter. This cast a shadow on a number of successful events in Turkey as the European capital of culture. But this was broadly covered by the media, by the way. What's that? What is it all about? About a clash of civilizations? An attack against secular followers? Western culture followers? Which has been gaining ground in Turkey for the past years? Or the outcome of prejudices? A clash between the secular and the religious? the spiritual, all that results in a change of stereotypes, change in the lifestyle. Some people are happy, others are not. Quite often this results in provocations, clashes. I'm talking about this particular case, and almost at the same time there was another case, a positive example, a Turkish stylist, designer, gay, organized a review, fashion show in a madrasa, a fortress of Islam, as you know. It was first banned, then it was allowed. The media covered this issue. When the fact that these things are discussed means that there is a change taking place, and the media are contributing to this change. Unfortunately, there has been quite great popularization in Turkey amongst the media, but I don't think this covers just the European perspective. I think it's more a matter of where the media is situated on the political and social spectrum. The media close to the government are supposed to be pro-European. The opposition media are supposed to be anti-European. But that's a general statement. I don't think there are campaigns in the Turkish media against the Turkish accession to the EU, unlike the campaigns in some Western media, which really speak against Turkish accession to the EU. And I think that the media covering broadly the European perspective are having a hard time, because public support for this idea in Turkey has slumped down to about 38%. It used to be 70%. Of late, there's been quite a negative public attitude to the European Union. Some of the Turks ask themselves the question, why do we need the EU? Others say, no matter what we do, why bother? They won't take us, because we are Muslim. I read quite an interesting definition of Turkish relations with the EU. I think it was the Milliyet newspaper. I'll quote it. It's by the chairman of KİSİAD, the Turkish Association of Industrialists, quite a well-reputed NGO. The chairperson is Miki Boyner. She was talking about Turkey and the EU, and it said, these relations are like a new person who's got blood transfusion. He neither gets better nor dies. Then, the other issue, the attitude of citizens in all EU countries to Turkish accession. There are negative elements like Islamophobia. Historically speaking, the threat of Islam has defined partly the European identity. But Islam and the Orient are different things. The Orient has something to do with our culture. You can see that in the Balkans as well, and they are part of Europe. I don't know whether Turkish politicians, the government, and all those circles in society in favor of Turkish accession to the EU, all those who think that this is a priority, find it easy to work in such an environment. But the media are having a hard time, that's for sure. I think that the media need more support than politicians. The media expect a clear signal from the European Union. The Turkish media are discussing the issue of for and against Turkish accession. That's the right way to go, I think, because this will help us define the future of the European Union. Will it be a unity of all nations or a federal entity? Or maybe there will be a third option. Because, as I said, Turkish media deliver surprises.
In the recent past,
естествено държавната телевизия и радио, но сега не е така. Интернет, радио, десетки телевизионни канали, вестници, списания. Съществуват държавен...
In the recent years, Turkish citizens would find out the news about from newspapers and the national television, the state television. Now things have changed, but whatever happens, we have democratic reforms, democratic changes related to the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, which is the source of suffering for the media at any rate. The topics, the events, the comments regarding the European Union, we read about this right away in Turkish media. Turkish citizens find out about this right away because we already have a theoretical preparation, we have the technical equipment. This is something that we cannot overlook because we are living in the times of progressive technological development. And I definitely think that if it weren't for the Turkish media, the European topic wouldn't have been within the scope or on the radar of the Turkish society. So what do we do if we don't have the media? We call the media the fourth power in the democratic society. I'm sure that Turkish media would be even more active if it were developed this European perspective. I told you that the Turkish media can deliver surprises. When I used to live in Bulgaria, I wouldn't even dare dream to be here in Brussels at the heart of the European democracy. Bulgaria is one of my homelands. I call it the homeland because I was born there and Bulgaria joined the EU. And now my dream is for Turkey, my other homeland, which helped us recover from the open wounds that was caused to us in the past. Turkey, which secured the opportunity for a lot of people like me to develop. So my wish is for Turkey to join the EU because I wouldn't want to think about Turkey without the EU. Is Turkey ready? Of course not. But I'm thinking now, which one of the the countries that recently joined was ready actually for the EU? Sorry for this emotional conclusion, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now we look to you after your long listening to these very inspiring talks. Who can I give the floor? Yes, go ahead. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here in this room. It's my first time. I'm quite excited. My name is Janai Dale, and just like Ms. Denise said, I am also Turkish, but I work and live in Bulgaria. I'm a Bulgarian Turk. So I would like to congratulate first Ms. Pelin Batu about the nice words that she shared about women and the rights of women, the fact that she talked about culture, that she talked about education. My profession is a teacher of Turkish. And this concerns me. This concerns the teachers of Turkish in Bulgaria. Everywhere we have problems, but we have problems in order to solve them. So my question is, if I can start from left to right, if you don't mind, or shall I address my questions only to the last speakers? Or to everyone? because I have questions that concern everyone. Okay, so I will address it to you. Starting to addressing my question to Mariette Schaake. My question is, how can Europe accept a future Turkish European? How can the old European accept the future Turkish European?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I also come from Bulgaria. I'm Turkish. I was born in Bulgaria. This is my first time out of the country. I would like to ask, why would religion be a problem? I think we live in a democratic society where everyone has the right to choose their religion. There are many Bulgarians who prefer the Muslim religion. There are also Muslims who prefer Christianity. There are churches, there are mosques in both countries. Everyone has a right of choice. Would it be Buddhism or Islam or Christianity? This is my question. Also, we all come to this world the same. We are the same biologically, so the differences come in our nurture, the differences in our context, in the environment that we grow up in. So this is not a reason for conflict. There are many stages in the development of each state, and we have to try and improve for the better the way Turkey is doing and the way Bulgaria is doing. Bulgaria joined the EU and continues developing, and I think Turkey should do the same. There are many things that we should continue changing, but there are a lot of positive sides, a lot of positive change. I would like to ask about the people, about the disabled, about the orphans, the homes for the orphanages, the violence, the domestic violence. I would like to ask these questions. I know there is a positive change in Turkey. I know medicine is very well developed in Turkey, and many people go there to get treatment. A lot of Europeans go there to get treatment and vice versa. There are many commonalities. I don't think boundaries should be a problem. And people should get together and focus on the humanitarian aspect, the good nature of people, and the communication between them. This is all I had to say. Thank you.
Just looking around the room. Yeah, okay, we'll add one more question and then we'll do answers.
I would like to ask a question. Serdi Halilova is my name. Aydin Tashbash, Mr. Aydin Tashbash is who my first question is addressed to. Yes, there are two sides. Although media is considered the fourth power and they have the capability of pointing the attention of the civil society towards the problems, they are affected, though, by the other three powers, as you put it. My question is as follows. If we accept that media is a business sector and they enhance their market, in this case, in my role as a woman, I would like to ask, why is the gender issue not occupied by the media yet? Although I know part of the answer to my question. Of course, the society would like to focus on the more topical issues. Maybe this is not an attractive topic for the society, but of course it's up to you to answer. After all, half of the humanity, roughly speaking, consists of women. This is my question. Thank you.
The second round, because these are quite some complex issues. So first I'll give the floor to Aslı Aydin Tashbash, and then if anything is unanswered, I will try to give an answer to the other questions.
Mariti, I wonder if you should take the how can old Europe accept the future of Turkey, question.
First, sure.
Because it's more of a European question.
Sure. Yes, the last one was for you. Thank you for the questions. I personally don't identify Europe in terms of old Europe and new Europe. I think we have to see it as a community that adheres to the same values. And as I mentioned in my introduction, that is something that needs constant work. There's always room for improvement, and we have to also be critical to ourselves. There was earlier mention of self-confidence. Self-confidence is very important, but self-criticism is also very important, especially when it comes to the gaps between stated values and lived experiences and practices of people that live in Europe. And so I believe that we need to work very, very hard to make sure that Turkey does well in its accession process and gets to be a member of the EU as soon as possible. And this requires work from the EU side as well as from the Turkish side. And we're facing some challenges, especially in the political climate at the moment, because we see various countries where elections have taken place, where those parties that tend to be more critical about the accession of Turkey or of new member states in general are gaining voices. So this means that the parties such as my party, a liberal party from the Netherlands, but also the families here, the bigger political groups in the European Parliament, have to work harder to also help Turkey meet the Copenhagen criteria, to prove that it's actually not such a stretch, such a big difference between Turkey and the EU, but I think the best way to do it is to show, don't tell. So not talk about it too much, but make sure that the values are actually in place, that the reforms in Turkey are going well, and that they're recognized and supported from the EU. But again, there's a lot of work to be done. I wish we were further in the process. Another question was about religion and why is this a problem? It doesn't have to be a problem. I believe religion is a very individual and personal experience that the state should stay as far away as possible, but allow for the most far-reaching freedoms for the individual to live his or her life in the way that suits best. It is an argument that's often used by those who think that Turkey should not join the EU. Others also say that it doesn't matter if you have a different religion, you could still join. So I think we have to be careful to make religion too much of an argument in this discussion. There are criteria laid out that map the requirements for candidate member states if they want to join the EU. And we should focus on those. And this includes respect for diversity, room for many different individuals in Turkey, in the EU, and yeah, fundamental freedoms and respect for their human rights. This is what matters, and it doesn't matter what conviction or belief or outlook on life people have, as long as they stay within the confines of the law.
Quick answer on the religion question. I agree with Marici that religion should not be part of the debate in Turkey. People live Islam in different ways. Different people live it in different ways. It's a moderately religious country. Having said that, obviously there's different sort of the whole gamut of religiosity, from the atheist to very irreligious to liberal to conservative to very religious to also quite more Orthodox Muslims. But that said, what is important is that you have a secular state. Turkey is going to review the way it interprets secularism, but it's not going to review secularism per se. We can, it's obviously, it's been enforced, secularism has been used in Turkey in sort of for example, right now there's popular demands like women want to go to university with a headscarf, and I think that's something we're going to discuss over this year, and I think it's not going to make Turkey any less secular if women go to university with a headscarf. I'm okay with that. But we're not going to change the nature of the republic, which is going to be secular, because you cannot have democracy without secularism. You just cannot have a democracy without strong laws that guarantee that the state remain without a religion. So I do think that we are confident and mature enough in our democracy that the changes we're going to make, such as the headscarf law, are not going to endanger Turkish democracy, because they're going to meet popular demands, but they're not going to, because I do think that even conservative Turkey is mature enough to know the value of secularism. On the issue of women in media, and the other question, I think you're right, it's problematic. We don't really cover women's issues unless it's very sensational, unless it's very sexy or very sensational, or there's blood or there's betrayal or tear. That's the way media is. We do have campaigns. That's the way media is all over the world. We have campaigns because we're a business, as you said. We have to sell newspapers, and people don't want to be preached. They want to buy the gossip, the juice, the blood, the tear, the love, whatever. And I'm not proud of it, but I do know that that's globally the case. It's a global problem. We do have, at Milliyet, we're known for having a major campaign, Haydi Kızlar Okula, which is about girls' education, and particularly in Eastern Turkey. I'm very proud of that campaign. I think we've had it for, you mentioned it in your speech, we've had it for a long time. You know, there are times that we have a lot of women columnists, a lot of women reporters. We don't have women decision makers in media. That's the other problem, not just what we cover, but also the makeup of media. We have, yes, we have a lot of women columnists now. We have, when I look at the reporters in the newsroom, many are young women, you know, half of them are young women, photographers, etc. But I do think it's important for women to also be in decision-making positions, because that's how you change the language and the tone and the sensitivities in media. If you don't have, you know, I'm on the editorial board, like I sit when I sit with my editors, it's just 10 people and plus only 2 women, and I'm new at my newspaper, so it's forever it's been just 1 woman, and most newspapers don't even have that on their editorial board. It's just guys. When you have a bunch of guys sitting around a table, they're going to pick a different picture for the front page, they're going to pick a different story, they're going to pick a different angle. You know, I'm not saying every guy, you know, these decision makers are all macho and insensitive, but it's the thing that will make a difference at the end of the day is to have women in position as editors in decision-making positions, in positions of power and hiring, etc. So I think that's something we need to see.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would also like to say a few words about women in Turkey. It was mentioned about the journalist by Asli. Also, the participation of women in management is scarce. There are no role models for women that are powerful. There are no mayors, there are no municipal chairs, there are no regional government heads that are women. And I think this is a shortcoming, a serious disadvantage in Turkey. But there is, however, an achievement in this area, because I remember 15 years ago when I moved to Turkey, everything was gray and black and only men, no women whatsoever. And today, however, we have some advance. We have a woman which is head of a regional council. A lot of articles were written about this by media. So gender equality is indeed a topic and is a huge issue in Turkey. It's being commented, should there be a quota for women so they can enter more areas in society, on all levels, on management levels. Others say, however, that if we put the quota principle in, this wouldn't be democratic, and we are trying to find the right balance, to find the solution, which is the right approach. Or maybe the first or the second or a third way is something that we should look for. So these are processes going on in Turkey in this respect, and this is very active. People are committed. A dialogue takes place, which is a prerequisite or a step forward in order to achieve some advance, some progress. Now, a few words about religious rights and freedoms. I completely agree that the secular state is what's important here, because only then can we guarantee and provide for the rights of all religious minorities. At the same time, here I would go back to something in the past. A few years ago, we couldn't even talk about, say, Bulgarians who came to Turkey and they would go to church and have their rituals and traditions. Whereas now, during Easter, Bulgarians come into Turkey to celebrate Easter in Turkish churches. Actually, I think more Bulgarians come to Turkish churches than they actually go to churches in Bulgaria. But definitely, the government did a lot in order to ensure religious rights for minorities. A lot of the property was returned. I've been quite involved in this topic and I follow it strictly. I do think that there is a problem, however, in this area regarding the Alevite. This is a really serious problem in Turkish society. I will repeat, this is a process developing, going on, and I hope it continues to develop to a positive end. Thank you.
The floor, thank you.
Since the address of household abuse wasn't put into question, I wanted to add something as to that. Up till about a few years ago, there were only a handful of shelters for women to go to. Right now, that number is quadrupled. So, yes, we're going in the right direction. In Turkey, the recent statistics declare that it's the Roman citizens that are undergoing most abuse in their households, especially in the Edirne region, which is close to you. And what the government did was basically, we weren't as bad as France, thank God, but we worked to scatter them about. So, they were basically implanted to more urban projects. I don't think this is the best answer to it, because these people, when they are moved, displaced, not only are they losing their culture, but, it is, in a way, pushing them into a ghetto, which isn't obviously the best solution. But in terms of household abuse, certain rights have been implanted, and as I said, the number of shelters has quadrupled. Thank you.
So a question there, and if other people have questions, please raise your hands.
Hello, my name is Ekin. I'm from the 3H movement, Üçe Hareketi, a young liberal organization in Turkey. Actually, unfortunately, the only young liberal organization. First, I would like to have some comments on Aydın Taşbaş's remark that the cost in Turkey was liberal. With all due respect, I think it's a bit a misleading statement, because it's traditional now that the cost is a Republican People's Party voting. And I think if there were some members from that party here in this hall, they would have a heart attack to hear that their party is called liberal. Yeah.
Liberal in the American context is generally, because I was talking about the map in the United States, liberal in the American context generally means left-wing. Republican People's Party being left-wing. I am translating that as in liberal lifestyle. And when I write about it, I talk about the coast having a liberal lifestyle. And liberal it quite openly means left-wing in America, in American English. But I know in Europe it kind of has a different connotation, and that's probably partly why you're confused. In Turkey also it has a third, altogether different connotation.
Thank you. I'm aware of the difference, but I think this would even give the real left-wingers a heart attack to say that they're left-wing, but still, I'm not going to speculate on that. I think Mrs. Diniz was absolutely right on her statement that the media has a great impact on the public opinion. And with this perspective, I would like to voice my concern as a young liberal activist that we really lack the media support in Turkey, and maybe Aydın Taşbaş could be of help to us, because we're planning to go on a roadshow next week in Turkey to promote constitutional change and also promote liberal ideas in cities where liberalism is almost never heard of, to promote free market ideas and individual rights and freedom of religion, freedom of association. And unfortunately, the only time that we've been in the media, on your newspaper, for example, was when we protested against the tech workers in support of privatization, and it was not a very bright portrait. So it will be really nice to see the liberal views on your newspaper. And in fact, you can come to Antalya, where we'll have speakers on the EU and support for the EU from liberal perspective. And one more thing, in case that is not known among European liberal circles, Andrew Duff's statement in the recent years on Atatürk's pictures being everywhere had a great impact in Turkey, and in fact, in the media, it came to media as if it was a demand from the EU that we should get rid of Atatürk's pictures, and now it's being forward. It's become a phenomenon of forward mail chains. I in fact get almost every day mails that that say that the EU wants us to get rid of Atatürk, our great leader, as they call him. Sorry. And I would like to thank you, because it was Milliyet, your newspaper, who interviewed Andrew Duff and cleared up the issue. But I think if the European liberals want to raise public awareness of the EU in Turkey, this is one of the issues they need to touch upon. It's very absurd, I'm aware, but the impact is great in Turkey. That you have this misconception, so we need to clear these misconceptions. We are trying to do it, but we don't have much power, so we always appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The next question, the gentleman over there. Yes?
Докато слушах въпросите, искам първоначално да се...
I was listening to the questions. My name is Ahmet Chulakov. I chair the Bulgarian businessmen and intellectuals in Belgium. I have graduated from the Istanbul University, International Relations, and I belong to the Turkish University School. And Ms. Batu, I find out here from the introduction that she's graduated in the United States. I don't think the educational system in Turkey is any worse than what we have in the Western countries and in the United States. And listening to the European statements, I can see a pattern: the Cyprus question, the Armenian genocide, the rights of women. I don't think we should focus on this that much. I think we should focus on our attention of how Turkey is to develop, how it should remove the barriers ahead to its accession to the EU. And I have a question to the representatives of Turkish media. Media have a negative attitude to the EU accession. How ready is Turkey to join? How should Turkey join? How should Turkey overcome these barriers? What are the areas for improvement? Something else that I would like to comment on and correct regarding the different fronts in Turkish media, the ones supporting the EU accession, the ones who want Turkey to develop, and the others hindering Turkish development. We know the role of the underworld, the army, the military, and also Bulgaria joining the EU. I would like to ask the representatives of the media, the last 10 years, the last 8 years of the last few governments, what is the progress made if you compare it to the previous 50 years, let's say? Maybe if you have some statistics regarding this comparison. This is what I'd like to ask now.
The European Parliament, an ex-member of the Council of Europe for 9 years, working for the LIBE political group. Now I am in a different political group in the European Parliament. I have been following the last 9 years the gender issue in Turkey. And in fact, I work together with a lot of Turkish women, parliamentarians, who were members of the same committee, the Committee of Equal Opportunities of Men and Women. And there are 2 or 3 things which we consider that they are still in democratic deficit from Turkey. The honor crimes which still exist, unfortunately. It's not a matter to have a lot of shelters. The effort should be to prevent violence against women. And of course, the more shelters one country has, it's an indication that the more violence exists. The Council of Europe has 9 criteria which countries meet the criteria to protect women. And I think that Turkey is very low as far as the score because it does not meet these 9 criteria. There is a long way for the women issue. My second observation is about what Mrs. Denise has said. She mentioned that there are no discriminations among religions. I am a Greek Orthodox, and I know that the Greek Orthodox Church is suffering. The school of Hak is closed, and also the Patriarch, every now and then, cannot say, freely what he thinks. So the minorities are not so much respected still, even though there is a lot of progress during the recent years, and I admit that. And I congratulate the people in Turkey because recently, when they had the referendum, they voted in favor of the referendum. But still, I am a person who tries to be very objective as far as the process of Turkey to become a member of the European Union. And I must admit that I read a lot of things about Turkey, written not only by Turkish people, but also from Europeans. There is a problem with the Alevite community, with the Syrian Church, with the Greek Orthodox Church, and also there is a problem with the Kurdish women because most of them are illiterate. You have a large extent of women, Kurdish women, who do not know how to write or how to read. Don't compare Istanbul with other parts of Turkey. There is so much difference. And I have been, believe me, a member of the delegation for the accession of Turkey to the EU, and I have spoken with homosexuals, NGOs, non-governmental groups who came and met the delegation of Europeans, and believe me, they say these things. We are just recording what they say. There is a problem with the media, freedom in the media, and the trade unions. And these have been evaluated in annual reports of the European Parliament. And so I keep my fingers crossed that Turkey will move faster for all these transformations that should take place, because right now is very far away from becoming indeed one of the other member states of the European Union. And the last thing, I am also a Cypriot, a refugee since 1974, and I would like to say here, even though you don't discuss political issues, that Turkey has to respect the protocol, because when they sign something, they have to implement it. If they don't, it means that they don't respect the values and their obligations towards the European Union. Thank you very much.
Okay, one more question, then we're going to go to the last round of answers, and then
okay,
the seminar's over. Go ahead.
I'm from Cyprus. I'm a Turkish Cypriot, and even though it doesn't have a place in the seminar, some people from the audience raise a Cyprus problem or Cyprus issue. First of all, I would like to ask these people whether they know the Cyprus problem. What is it really? And for what the Turkish Cypriots have gone through all these years, and how much effort they put in for a solution. In 2004, we voted yes for the Annan Plan, which was supported by the UN, by the international community, by the European Union itself. And yet we are out of the European Union. Greek Cypriots are in, and they're, I'm sorry, but they're doing everything possible. They're exploiting their European Union membership, and they're doing everything possible to prevent the measures taken or planning to be taken for the Turkish Cypriots. We just want our rights on the island in a federal state, and we just want our place in the world. I mean, despite our efforts, we are isolated in many areas. I mean, economically, culturally, our universities cannot participate in the Bologna process. We cannot trade with the European Union with a preferential tariff. There are so many things to be told, but as I said, I want to respect, because this is not the this issue doesn't have a place in the seminar. Thanks.
Maybe you can do this over coffee later, because I'm a bit worried that we are going to drift into a Cyprus discussion. Okay, but one minute and then we get the answers.
I respect very much the rights of the Turkish Cypriots, and as a European parliamentarian, I think that our common enemy is the Turkish occupation of the island. If the Turkish army leaves, the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots can live together as we used to live for many hundreds and thousands of years.
Okay, I think... Yes, you would like to respond first? Go ahead.
Let me take this one. The question by the lady, I couldn't catch her name, sorry. Thank you. I didn't say there was no discrimination. I said progress has been made. As far as respect for religious rights is concerned. Since you are an insider, I'm sure you know that some time ago, property was restituted back to religious communities, and the Greek community actually got the biggest share of property. They got their ownership back, and I think that the Armenians rank second, the Bulgarians are at the bottom. As far as the divinity school in Halki or Heybiyada Peninsula is concerned, the Orthodox school, I live in Yucada Island, which is right opposite Heybiyada. Last year in May, the ecumenical patriarch and Prime Minister Erdogan came up there. The St. George Monastery in Yucada Island, and they talked about this Orthodox divinity school. It's true that the matter has been politicized to some extent, but when the Ecumenical Patriarch and Erdogan held their talks, the statement was covered by the Greek community television as well, and he said that they indeed held talks. There has been some progress as far as this issue is concerned, but I myself cannot tell you, well, the matter will be solved, but it's being discussed. When I said that there has been progress, I meant that, like 10 years ago, nothing was known about the Ecumenical Patriarch. It was a sort of closed topic, closed book. Now the topic has been open. I mean, the foundations have been laid for further discussions. That was my point. I don't know whether you're happy with my answer, but that's the situation. The 24th of September is the day of the Greek church in Yucatan, the celebration. If you haven't been there, I would like to invite you there. We'll go up there, visit the Greek monastery, or we can do that at Easter. In Bucata, all the 4 Orthodox churches are open 24 hours. At midnight, the Ecumenical Patriarch comes, delivers a service. The services are attended by Greeks, by Cypriots, Greeks from other countries. I mean, there have been so many foreigners in the past years that the streets were chock-a-block with people, literally, and we can't leave our houses because the streets are full of people.
Businessman talking about Turkish media not supporting European Union issues. Turkish media is by and large very supportive of Turkey's accession process. We just don't have very many stories about Europe or the accession, and this is probably something that is a problem for our friends in the diplomatic world. Part of it is because, again, we don't have very many